So hi Siddharth. It's great to be talking to you. Welcome
Hi.
to the Red Sparrow and welcome to our show Untangled. So today we are going to be untangling all the bits and pieces that go into making Siddharth Diwan both the artist and the person behind the artist. So that's how we approach it. Tell me, you recently made a TVC with Flipkart in this lockdown.
Yeah.
How did you plan it? How did you execute it? Because it looks so good quality wise. So were all these actors, it also stars Amitabh Bachchan, so were all these other actors in Bombay itself, or did they shoot it from their hometowns? And how did you figure out if the quality was good enough?
When the job came to me and we realized that we are physically not going to be present there, I think one conclusion I came very quickly to was that we'll have to organize ourselves in a very different way. It's not how we're used to working, but that doesn't mean that we just sit, open our Zoom chats and start working on it. We have to have a lot of planning, and the producers also understood that, and I think it turned out decent because we had planned it very well. We were shooting in 4 different cities every day.
Okay.
We had scheduled it like morning we are shooting in Bombay, some places, someone's house, and by afternoon we are in Delhi, and by evening we are in Prague. So we had like many people, mostly like amateurs, and we literally found like whatever cameras they had, whatever like support system they had. If they had some cousin or chacha or dad or someone who can just hold the camera, we would just get them, brief them, spend a day with them, explaining them how they need to work with this. We had softwares which we have figured out where we could remote control cameras. So because the job came, I started doing a lot of research into it, me and my team, and we figured out a lot of ways to get as much control as we can have, and rest, it's all communication and planning. If you get that right, then in that resource and in that time frame you can extract as much quality as possible.
But what if someone didn't have a camera? A lot of people don't have like a camera, like they shoot it with their laptops or phones.
So we used phones. Everyone has a phone. Every phone has a camera. We figured out, there are softwares which are commonly used, which are professional softwares to get some professional controls on a camera phone like the Filmic Pro.
Okay.
Then we had remote apps with which we could take over the phone. Like I could access their phone, open whatever app I want, record it, cut it, send it to a group where all of us can review the shot. So it was a bit cumbersome, but yeah, I think we figured out a way to.
Great job done. So what else has happened in this lockdown till now? Have you done other shoots also, or has it been a personal learning period mostly?
A bit of both. I think first 2 months was a lot of spending time with yourself and reading and getting back to a lot of stuff that you've been missing out on, because honestly, like the amount of work that you end up doing, that pre-lockdown how things were, that there was not so much. I think I was missing out that period that I had in film school, where you'll read a lot, you watch a lot of films, and not necessarily about read anything about films, but anything under the sun.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that, and in between these remote commercials started coming. So I did. In fact, I shot quite a bit through the lockdown, mostly remote. So yeah,
Okay,
it was different.
Yeah. So while reading, like, could you share some books which you discovered, some movies that you watched? Could you share like some for our audiences?
I think I saw a lot of stuff actually. I think one of the most inspiring stuff I saw was a portrait of a lady on fire, which I think which moved me, which was something which I felt like it's something I subscribe to. I think that kind of a film, and I quite enjoyed that. And I think another film I saw was Capernaum. Very, very beautiful film. I mean, again, like very inspiring. It's one of those films which makes you like, go back and go out there, shoot a good film, and, make a film. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff I saw actually, but these are the two which really stood out for me. Yeah.
Wonderful. Even your own film Bulbul came out on Netflix.
Yeah, so that's why lockdown also became like a busy time for me, because I had 2 films which released in a gap of 2 weeks. One was Chintu ka birthday.
Yeah.
and one was of course one was Bulbul. So I think between like doing tech checks for the prints and last minute things, and then of course once it comes out, then a lot of people react to it, they message you, they call you. So yeah, I mean that took like I think a good 1 month of my life like was spent in that only.
So in this show Untangled, we follow a certain format. We have 3 sections. So there is Inception. So we will talk about your childhood and your mass comm days and your work in Bombay before you left for SRFTI. That part, and then we have the second section called Assembly Line. There we will talk about your training days in SRFTI, and then we have the last section called Harvest. So where all this knowledge and all this training came to fruition, and you got to present the work that we see today. So that's how we'll approach it. So let's begin with Inception. So you have earlier said that you have been a film buff, but you were born in a business family in Delhi. Can you recall some of the films you watched as a child and which have stayed with you?
My film viewing in that period was very different. It was, I think, ranging from watching all those Dracula films from under my blanket, which probably my dad would be watching, and I am sneaking, like pretending to sleep and watching, those horror flicks, because my dad was into all those Dracula kind of films. And films like anything which is coming, like a Born Free or a Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or Alice in Wonderland and everything. That period of film viewing was a lot about being in awe of being transported to these different worlds, and I was just taking in everything, and I think I was enjoying everything, like from watching a film set in a fantasy world to in a jungle and all of that. I think I think all of that has kind of stayed with me. I mean, I think not the films, but the feeling of watching the films, like what you feel when you watch these stories and these different worlds, and that stayed with me. I think my conscious period happened of watching films once I got into mass comm. That's when I think I saw a lot of, I think, films like Seven. That was the time it had come out, and a mixed bag of everything. From a little bit of maybe a film of some Tarkovsky or Fincher or Soderbergh, and you're just watching a mix of things. And I was consciously looking at stuff that, okay, it's the photography part which is I'm getting attracted to, even though I didn't have any, a way of looking at things. It was just random, like whatever film is you're just bumping into, you're watching. It was little later I realized that you can't just consume stuff like this when you're academically approaching it. When you're approaching it professionally, it is something that you want to pursue as a profession also. You need to get a little, you have to watch it in a certain way. So I think that I started doing much later, I think, in film school especially.
So like when you then went for mass comm, you indulged in wildlife shooting, wildlife photography. So looking at the kind of work which you did later, like realistic cinema, wildlife shooting is quite like realistic cinema in a sense that actors improvise. So animals don't know the script. You have to follow them. And so did those learnings, like treating fiction today as non-fiction, which you were doing then, did those learnings help you, and how did it help you in the work that you...
I mean, for sure. I think now that you put it up like that, it is exactly like that. In when you're in the jungle, you don't know what's going to happen. Something will happen, and you have to be very be present. You have to have your senses very active, and you always looking out for things. Maybe it could be a small bird amongst those hundreds of trees. So you're always spotting these things, and you shoot and you capture stuff. You embrace a lot of the things which happens in front of the camera, and because you don't have control on that, but at the same time you are so present in trying to make a drama narrative around it that you're constantly thinking of at what time will you zoom in, at what time will you move the camera, will you follow, will you come to the character from somewhere. You're
Yeah.
constantly like thinking like that. So I think, and my initial film work especially is like a lot like that. It's about a lot of capturing stuff, and you know, like the wildlife time also was a good learning experience for me, because it's like 3-4 months of being in a place where there is no human presence.
Mm-hmm.
You are there, you have a co, like a camera person, and then you have a driver with you, and sometimes you have a forest guard, and that's it. Like that's your only human interaction, and you are there in the jungle for 4 months, waking up every day, shooting sunrises and sunsets and animals, and you just to yourself. And I think that period also gave me a lot of time to introspect and to think
Mm-hmm.
that how I want to pursue it, what I want to do. Yeah, just the confidence of also handling this equipment, you know, because we are constantly on like cameras which have a 1600 zoom, and you know 2000 zoom lenses on it, and it's very tough to operate. So you know your operating skills also become
Mm-hmm.
much more refined. Also, I used to be mostly be the guy shooting macro stuff, you know, butterflies and earthworms and some spiders and all of that, and all of that stuff needs a lot of patience. And you know, especially butterflies, when you have to shoot them, you have to really, with those big cameras and all,
Mm-hmm.
approach them very slowly without disturbing, so they don't fly off. So I don't know, like all of that, you know, just gives you a way of looking at things. And
With that, can we talk a little bit about your film Titli? Because it's very raw and real in the real space, and it has been said that actors have improvised a lot. So, did you also have to improvise along with them, or was it shot in a way that you improvise but within these limitations? How was it done?
no, there were no limits for them. I From the very beginning, I think even before Kanu telling me, I was very aware of the kind of cast that we were dealing with, and we thought that it will be best from the beginning to approach it in a way that you keep them free. You don't give them marks. You don't light them in a way that they have to hit marks. You just it's their house, and they should move freely around
Yeah.
the house. So, and I think also like a couple of year before. No, a couple of years before I shot Titli, I had gone for a workshop to Busan International Film Festival. There is a thing called Asian Film Academy, and I was a part of it, where Hussein Se was a mentor, and he said a very interesting thing. He said that when I direct actors, like you know, he's known for his longer takes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So he says that if I'm directing an act, and the scene is supposed to be that she's making tea for herself, you know, it's her house, it's her kitchen, she exactly knows, like you know, it's an automated thing. Your hand goes for the sugar and for the tea and the water, and you know, you can't tell the actors that you go first, pick up that and then that. And you know, you if you start giving them too much directions and you start restricting them, the whole the organic nature of it will go for, it will start looking staged and all. And I think all of that I applied in Titli, where we started lighting up in a way that there are no lights inside, they can move wherever they want. You know, with the camera is very instinctive, and I'll go and the thing was that the film also didn't demand for it to look like pretty in a certain way. Like you know, it was supposed to look a bit crass and raw and ugly in a way. I think all of that kind of contributed to the whole
True.
look of it. Yeah.
So, what happens is that when a writer writes from a personal space, actors often go into their some emotions felt before and try to recreate it in some character.
Yeah.
Can a cinematography job be inspired from something you saw in your childhood or from real life or your personality, or is this job a very grammar based job in a way, in a sense that a certain emotion can be evoked only through this certain color palette or a certain way of lighting or a certain camera movement? Is it a very grammar heavy job, or you can go into some memory you had in childhood and you want to tap that honesty and created?
It can go anywhere. I don't feel there is one way of looking at things, and I mean, definitely, when you're looking at scenes and you're trying to break them down, you always go into your memories, your inspirations, and things you've seen and films you've seen. I mean, even if you're not consciously thinking about them, it happens, and. But there are also films which are very grammar based, and that's why I generally, like, with every film, find another way of designing them, because I feel that each story deserves a different language, a different grammar. And in some places you go from your memories, like I remember in Queen, a lot of my lighting and everything was happening, and how I was looking at the character was happening from my own memory. I absolutely did no prep for that film. I literally landed upon the shoot, but I knew that world so well because it was about someone who's from Lajpat Nagar, and I've grown up there in Delhi. I've grown up in Lajpat Nagar, and I've exactly lived that life, where you are only in your house and your school and your house, and you don't see anything else. You just experience, you live in that nutshell, and that's your life. It's only when you, like, for me, when I think probably came in college, that I started traveling and I saw the outside world, and I was like, wow, this is like, there is a huge world out there. Before that, you are so protected and you don't know it. So Queen, like, a lot of my lighting setups actually came from my memory of, in the winters, how will the sun come in, or that feeling, how do you evoke from your memory. And also your lensing and everything starts coming from there, because when you live in that place for let's say 20 years of your life, 16 years of your life, you're every day walking that road, you're every day opening those doors and seeing that house. So you're not looking here and there. You're more focused on the people, and not the spaces, because they are like very by the by. And the moment you step out to the outside world, your vision becomes like this, like, you are just like wide-eyed and you're looking everywhere and anywhere, So I think Queen also was like that, the Delhi part was a lot about people, whereas when she travels outside, it's a lot about the world that she's experiencing. So I think, yeah, that was one film which came from my experience. And
with that, we have reached our second section called Assembly Line, where we are going to talk about your days at SRFTI. So you have earlier said that those were the days of learning, not just about cinema, but about a lot of other things. So can you tell us some of the influential books, movies, people, music, whatever you were exposed to at that time, which shaped your perspectives?
I was reading. I was always into a lot of factual books, and a little bit of fiction also. But to me, I think a lot of fiction, I think, which attracted was, of course, which was very visual and which just like makes you imagine things. So and also I read a lot of like books on artists and art history. So I mean, I was really attracted to that, the whole movement of art, like, from how it moved from various movements, like, from Renaissance to realism and impressionism and expressionism and all of that. I was really interested in that, and color theory. So I was reading a lot of that kind of stuff. Lot of like color philosophy and color theory and art and different artists. And I was a lot into surrealism and expressionism. These were my favorite movements at that time. A lot of films, of course, film viewing happened, and I was really opened up to the world of like films from everywhere and everywhere. And I remember, I think first week of Institute, we had a retrospective of David Lynch, and I was completely blown away because I had never seen something like that. And later on I was thinking to myself that who shows David Lynch in the first week of film school? It's too shocking. And
it was a signboard ki aage ye aane wala hai, isse bhi zyada aane wala hai.
Yeah, so it was pretty like I was like mind blown, and there were so many like intelligent people around me, like my batchmates and my seniors and the juniors and everyone. All these guys were like really talented, very sensible, like, artists in their own sense, and they knew about a lot of films and stuff. And I think in film school, because you're surrounded by people, you're constantly like learning new things every day, and you keep applying it to your thing and keep trying stuff. I think the filmmakers which mostly influenced me in that period were people like Stanley Brakhage, who was an American experimental filmmaker, uh, who used to sometimes not even use cameras to shoot his film. He would just stick things on the film emulsion and expose them and paint on them, and that's how he used to make films. And they're very abstract, but I don't know, like that kind of stuff that just kind of makes you think in a different way, you know. So I think that then David Lynch was something which attracted me. I mean everything, but these were the kind of filmmakers that I was more attracted to. Like the Dogma movement, like really inspired me, and I think it still has a big influence on me. Yeah, I mean, and also film school, you have all the resources, you have a lot of like excited like people around you, and then you shoot these short films and you do these experimental films and you're trying out stuff and you're failing at it also. But in film school you can afford to do that, you can just make the most terrible film in the world and it's okay, you move ahead. And, it's not like in the professional world where you completely screw it up and then you're thinking you'll probably not get the next job or something. So I was saying that in books, like I was enjoying a lot of stuff by like Cormac McCarthy. He's written like The Road and No Country for Old Men. These are also made into films and they're extremely visual. Like you read that stuff and you can imagine the way it's written.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff I'm enjoying. Like even like right now I'm reading one book, like it's called Everything About the Cosmoses, which is by Italo Calvino, and it's about like different phenomena which has happened in the history of Earth, where how Moon was formed, how Earth was formed, and how the universe came into. It's about that, but it's from a point of view of fictional characters. Like like in one story the character would be like an atom, and in one story the character will be a dinosaur, and it's just like a point of view of these different characters. So these kind of like just alternate way of telling stories and all of that always like kind of attracted me more, like where you also have new ways of telling a story. Like a Rashomon really inspired me because it was suddenly a new way of looking a narrative, and then later on like Apichat Pong's film, these kind of stuff, like I think which were more of my ideals at that time.
Since we are talking about books and movies and books being made into movies, so what I have observed is that since you were talking about these books being very visual, so sometimes what happens in a book is that an entire chapter is just about the thoughts of a person. But when we see it in a movie, it has to be dialogues or conversations or actions. Do you think that's a limitation that the audiovisual medium has that book doesn't have?
No, it's not necessary. I feel like even films can we have so many films which are like that, and not necessarily they are full of dialogues. I know that in in especially Bollywood, films tend to be more verbose. Like even in the South industry, you see a lot of verbose films. But I mean, yeah, sometimes it's necessary because probably we do talk a lot and we have a lot of communication like that, and I think it's probably coming from our ways of like traditions of theater and tamasha and all that.
True.
But at the same time, yes, sometimes it becomes unnecessarily heavy on dialogue, which people like Tarantino and Woody Allen have done, or Scorsese have done in a great way. Their films are also very talky and a lot of dialogue. But yeah, the film's demand for that, the sometimes the treatment is like that. But yeah, a lot of the times they become like radio plays. Even if I don't watch the visual, it's okay. I'll just like listen to the dialogues and the film. So that becomes a bit boring, and I don't know. It just becomes a lazy way of communicating, and I don't know. It just feels insecure that you want to just underline, communicate everything, and don't let anything leave it for imagination or for people to think. So it's possible in films also, but yeah, I mean, somehow like a lot more of it should happen, I think.
True, true, true. So there is a subsection in this section which we call related training, and there we talk about the related training an artist takes to substantiate their primary craft. So I have two questions here. Do you think our training in learnings in physics and optical physics would help a DP, and should they focus on that?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, like you have to know physics, and at the same time, I mean, I know a lot of DPs who probably don't know any of this and they still do well, and they are still great artists, and it's not necessary. But I feel that as a DP, you need to have that balance of knowing the technique, knowing the science of it, and knowing the craft of it and the art of it, because you might have great ideas in your head, but you won't be able to translate it on the screen if you don't know the technique well. And you might be a great technician, but because you don't have great ideas and great thoughts, then that technique doesn't take you anywhere. So I think you need to have a balance of it. You need to know both sides, and optics and physics you need to know, because it really helps you. It's all physics, like how the light is behaving, diffracting, why we see blue in the night, and why we see sunsets as red and sunrise as red, and it's all to do with, and the more you know of it, as DPs, you need to know about physics and chemistry and and art, and you need to know about a lot of things. It just helps. I think like it has helped me.
True, true. So with that, I come to the second question, which is that being a DP is a very physically demanding job. So do you think DPs should be focusing on their physical training as well? Because you need to shoot with heavy cameras in very difficult situations. Do you look at that also?
I think it is very important, uh, because the I mean, anyways, for any human being, it's important to stay fit and everything. But for a DP, yes, because you end up working for longer hours. You need to, if you don't have the stamina, then you start getting tired very soon. And by the end of the day, you're making decisions which are just like your body being uncomfortable and your mind being uncomfortable. And you are probably getting to that space of switching off and not putting your 100% into it, because you're tired and everything. And also, not necessarily you have to lift heavy equipment, but yes, there could be a film where you are doing like 10-minute takes with a camera on your shoulder and you're walking around. So it's necessary, because then your body stays calm and your mind stays calm, and there is no like other problems inside you which are making you ignore what you're supposed to do in your job. So it's very important to stay fit.
With that, let's move on to the third section called Harvest. Here we are going to talk about some of your projects. We like to begin with Peddlers. So you had told Vasan Bala while shooting it that after this film, either people are going to like me and they're going to call me for lectures and workshops, or they're going to never like this, and they would call this the shittiest work I've done. What was your mind space then, while making that film on such a low budget?
I was just, I was always a person who will embrace things. I'll just like go into things, and, I'll take it as an experience. So Peddlers was like that. I knew Vasan. I was really fond of him, and I totally subscribed to his idea of films and filmmaking. I when he told me there's a film to do, I had no other thought. Like I was like, yes, of course I'm doing this film. And then after that, it was a rough ride. It was a tough ride, but I don't now thinking about Peddlers. I don't remember it being tough, because the joy of shooting something and being with this energy of this people and making a film and telling a story, and every day going back with that feeling that you shot something, you created something, I just remember that. So yes, it was a tough one, but those things don't stay with you. We were just like too naive and too energetic and too like that we will just like make the best film in the world, which only we'll watch, and no one else will watch probably. But we are going to make great film.
Let's talk about your other early film, Queen, for which you won a Filmfare Award for Best Cinematography. And so, because of the unfortunate death of the former DP, you came in and you completed the film. How was it then assembling the film at such a stage? How did you manage to match up to what was done before?
I was not really trying to match up what was done before, because honestly it was a different section, like, you know, because that was a part where Queen has already in Paris and Amsterdam, and those parts were shot, so I had to just deal with the part to be shot in Delhi. So for me it was even though I was very new to the still I'll call myself new to the whole being a cinematographer. And it was, I think, the most Bollywood film. I was kind of attempting with song and all. I just like went with my instinct, and you know, like I said, that I knew that world very well. So I had some amount of confidence on how I need to look at it. So yeah, I went with the flow. Like I landed there, and I knew that I was the only new person on this set. Everyone else has been working together for a long time. But I just I gelled in. I think I'm that person who adapts very quickly, and I can get along with more people, because I mean, I think I am that kind of person. And yeah, so Queen was fun. Like I think the first time I landed over there, we had to shoot that London Thumakda song, and it was the first song I was ever shooting. So the choreographer was Bosco, and
After having watched David Lynch and all, was shooting a Bollywood song.
yeah, so I mean, you know, he was like this experienced like choreographer on location, and he told me that, oh, we are going to do this choreography, that choreography. I said, you know what, you just do your choreography and let me just move with the camera. And I don't know, like he also like kind of understood, probably found some value in what I'm saying, and there was no like argument around it. Literally, I just said, you do your choreography and let me just move around. And we did that. We did the whole choreography of the place, and I was just with the camera on my shoulder, just capturing stuff, like, you know, almost like, yes, there were bits in between where we did some design like choreography, but most of it was just like shooting a shadi video or something, you know, because that was a approach for me. Yeah.
Since we already talked about Titli, I would like to talk about two of your films which are similar in a certain way, Trapped and Chintu Ka Birthday. So both are like, Trapped is shot in one apartment and Chintu Ka Birthday is shot in one house. How did you create the claustrophobia in both these films?
Both the films are very different approach. I think Trapped was supposed to feel a bit more claustrophobic than Chintu.
Yes.
Chintu in my head was the house was supposed to be the safest place in the world. You know, yes, there is war outside, but there is some kind of a positivity which should ooze from this house, which was the philosophy of Madan's character, Vinay Pathak's character. And I think those things also we started doing with the choice of colors that we were doing in terms of palette and the way the light is going to come in.
Chintu is warm.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is warm, and it's in Trapped. It was different. Trapped, we wanted to be with the character all the time, and we wanted to. And honestly, like Trapped was not so much of pre-thought in design. Chintu was. Chintu, there was a lot of like pre-thought to it. Trapped was literally being on the set, Rajkumar doing something, and I am just instinctively trying to capture stuff, because
this was also like improvised.
It was completely improvised. There was a script, but it was not something which we followed as a document. We had pointers on the chain of events which he's going to go through, and within that, and joining them in terms of how will we move from one scene to another and what will happen within the scene was completely improvised. Like we were literally like doing something today, and then on basis of that deciding okay, now he has done this, so tomorrow is the rat scene, so it should happen like that. And within the scene also, Rajkumar is doing his own interpretation. Vikram is doing giving some instruction, and I'm just like following stuff and totally like on the go. And we had some rules in terms of that we will only lens him in a certain way. In certain sequences, we'll start distorting the spaces with wider lenses. We will never go out of the railing from where he's always stuck. The camera will also always stay inside. We won't go outside. So we had these small rules and all, which also we never really strictly followed. Like, it's just that it was completely like on the go how
Yeah,
it was making us feel.
true, true, true. I guess your lessons in wildlife shooting again came handy.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Chintu was much more designed because Satyanshu and Devanshu are also like Satyanshu, especially is an academic. So he has a certain a theory in his head about films and everything. And so we would like go scene by scene and decide how the light will change, how the way we're looking at these people will change, and how slowly the film will become dark. And it was also written like that. But and I knew that this is one film where I need to be just like in the background, don't do too much, and let the actors play it up. You don't need to do too much trickery around it. So yeah, Chintu was like that.
Now let's talk about this film Bhavesh Joshi Superhero, which you shot, and that chase sequence. Oh my god, that was so amazing! It starts from the road, goes to the basement, back to the road, then the railway station, and again back to the road.
Yeah.
How many nights did you take to shoot it, and how did you choreograph it? What were the timings that were allotted to you shooting in Mumbai?
I think we shot it over 4 nights, and Sebastian, who was the the bike double and the stunt guy for us for the bike sequence, he was the one who was designing a lot of stuff also. He said that he's worked on films like Skyfall and I think Transporter and all of those films. Like he's like the guy for bikes. He said that this is probably the fastest he's ever shot a bike chase, because we were literally like doing location shifts every day. I mean, we had only night to shoot it, of course, and we had like, I mean, I had to light up like patches of like a 1 kilometer road,
Mhm.
which I had never done in my life. But in a bike chase, from to get like even like a 5 second screen time, you need a little before and after for to be able to get onto that speed. So for that we had to light up very long roads, and I think those 4 days we none of us must have slept, because you're constantly like shooting something being pre-lit, we go and shoot that, something else being ready, we go there and shoot that, and next day already in daytime people working. So it was very tough, it was very taxing, but we planned it well. We I think uh, we had about seven locations, and I think with action the thing is that the more that the faster that you can move.
Okay.
So me and Vikram were very clear on what are we supposed to achieve, like what all shots we need, and like I would already plan for a lot of things and try to make it as efficient as possible.
What's the significance of these two palettes which are in the sequence, the yellowish palette and the bluish palette, or is it because just that's how the lighting was?
I just wanted a very a hyper look to the city. I wanted that the city, the urbanness of it should
Yeah.
be feel. I had actually just before shooting the film, I was in Japan for a month, and Japan, I was like just going crazy looking at like how hyper that place is. It just there's so much color and saturation, and when I started talking to Vikram about the film, we were going for a lot of recce's and stuff, and we were looking at all these like all going all over Bombay and going to the port side and town and the Lal Bagh side, and he will always tell me about the city and what was it before and what has become of it. And so his way of looking at Bombay also started, I started interpreting it into making it look very city, like all these colors, that is orange and the greens should like really stand out, these impure colors like magenta and green, which are generally seen in modern sources. And of course, the city outside, we started doing blue moonlight. So, like there is no presence of the city over there. So, yeah, that was the reason why I started like upping the colors so that, you feel that this city has been just becoming, being taken over more and more uh, by the buildings and the concrete all around. So like like sorry, like when my observation was like when I was in Japan, I would see that how well they have preserved their past. So they would have this
True.
100-floor skyscraper, and right next to it there'll be like a 200-year-old chai shop. And Bombay was different. When I was hearing all these conversations from Vikram, I would always like get a sense of that how he misses that Bombay that he knew of, like and how like all these buildings have come up and it's become so different. So all of these like started giving me ideas on how to look at the city.
That's really interesting. So now let's talk about Bulbul. So there's a scene where I don't know if it's going to be out, if it's going to be a spoiler if I say this, but so there's this male actor who commits some violent acts on a female actor there, and so it's shot very aesthetically. So it's aestheticization of violence there, and it creates a certain feeling when you watch it with music and rains happening around. How did you conceive that execution for that scene?
I think it happened during our prep and during a lot of our conversation, and we knew that that's a central point of the narrative. That everything which is happening after that is happening because of that.
Because of that.
That's a trigger point. So
Yeah.
we knew it's a very important scene, and it needs to be highlighted, or it needs to be underlined also in a way, and also it needs to come across as that this is it, like this is the moment where it all falls apart. So actually in the entire film we have not done any high speed shots. I can't think of any other high speed shot. That's the only sequence in the film, and that we thought has to be done like that because it needs to be highlighted as that moment of also like we're drawing parallels with the whole mythology part of it. And the thing is that that you also need to be fair to the aesthetic tone of the film. Just because it's a gruesome scene doesn't mean you start shooting in a gruesome way. The film has set a certain aesthetic, and you need to
Yeah.
also stick to that. You need to be true to that. It's not necessary to look at it in a ugly way. So and I genuinely, when we were shooting that, while seeing it, we were all getting goosebumps, and we were feeling in that moment I felt that I felt for her because it was so beautiful around her. Like it's so beautiful that it's heartbreaking that this is happening to her. And while doing it, we felt, and we all, like, I remember that day when all of us, the Rahul Bose and Karnesh, and we all sitting around the monitor, and we all just looked at each other. We knew that this is right. This is the right way to do it.
Very true. Very true. Then now you are shooting. You have shot already, or you're shooting Jayesh Bhai Zordar. So looking at your career graph, you started from Peddlers. You watched David Lynch, and now you're shooting a commercial potboiler Bollywood movie. How are you adjusting to this zone now? With all the budget and everything is there. Peddlers,
it is different. It is different, but honestly, I also got attracted to the film because what it is talking about. And yes, it has the stars. Yes, it has the biggest studio in the country and all of it. But still, what it is trying to talk about is what I was looking at. I am not really someone who will get attracted to a film because it has a star attached or a studio attached. I would rather do a indie film because it makes me feel something. So yes, but the functioning of it is very different. The scale of it is much larger. But yeah, I think because I think with Bhavesh I dealt with a lot of scale.
Yeah.
With Bulbul also I dealt with different kind of scale, and then my advertising experience, I think all of that just gives you a bit more confidence into how to deal with that zone. And I think I just want to also experience like all kinds of films. Like that's my also thing that I want to shoot an action film, I want to shoot a comedy, I want to like try my hand at different genre, just to see for myself also that how can I also like is my learning, how can I
Yes.
handle it. So I quite enjoy it, because that's why I looked up to also filmmakers like Kubrick, who would make a black comedy and then make a science fiction also. So I really want to explore all of those things. Yeah.
Sure. So, you made a film Haramkhor, and the director of Haramkhor has made another film Zoo on an iPhone.
Right.
So, over the years, we have seen that shooting equipments have become very cheap. Like iPhones have been shooting a lot of films, like Tangerine out there. And so, do you think that in the next decade in India, will filmmaking be accessible to anyone? And you don't need a lot of budget, at least to create the visuals.
I think it's already like that. Honestly, like I always, that's why I kind of really had a lot of respect for Shlok when he did his film on iPhone, because I knew that he's got a story, he wants to tell it. And, because, like I said, I'm also attracted towards the dogma.
You said that, yeah.
So I am generally a believer of that, it's not about cameras and lights and all of this. It's about the story that you're trying to say and the people who are trying to tell it. That's what makes difference. You can shoot it on anything. Celebration was, I think, shot on a Handycam, the Thomas Winterberg film, and it is incredible. Like, it's still one of my reference films. Like, I really love it, the way it's shot and all. I think we all get attracted to this conventional way of looking at beauty and what good images and what bad images. I think like that is what comes in our way, I think the reason why I also got an opportunity to shoot my first few films was because it has become so accessible.
True.
Yeah, because I shot on digital. My first Haramkhor was 16 but the reason why made it possible was because we shot it in like 16 days. So we shot the whole film in very few days. So we made it economically viable. But now it's accessible. Anyone can pick up a camera phone and do any camera, like lo-fi camera, and make a film.
Very true. With that, we end this conversation. And if you could tell us some of the upcoming projects that we would be able to see this year or next year from your side.
Yeah, it will be, I think, for the only one which is supposed to come is Jayesh Bhai Jodar, and after that, nothing really. Like I haven't shot anything after that. I am also not, because now this whole lockdown, I finished Jayesh Bhai in Feb, and right after that this happened. So yeah, so that's the only thing to look forward to for now.
Okay, well then, thank you so much. It was great fun talking to you. We learned a lot about cinematography, and I'm sure you'll be creating a lot of different kinds of films in the future, and we'll be looking forward to watching all those. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot.
Hey guys, if you like that video, do share it with your friends and family. Do not forget to subscribe to the Red Sparrow for educative and entertaining content, and make sure you press the bell icon.